Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Nityananda Vadotendur, Vasudha Prana Vallabha, Janava Jivita Patihi, Krishna Prema Prada Prabhu, Padmavati Sutta Sriman, Sachinandana Purvajaha, Bhavonmatta Jagatrata, Rakta Kaura Kalevaraha. नमो नमो अनिरुद्धाय ऋषिकेश इंद्रियात्मने नमः परमहंसाय पूर्णाय निवृत्तात्मने स्वर्ग अपवर्ग द्वाराय नित्यं शुचि सदे नमः नमः हिरण्यवीर्याय चातुर्होत्राय तांतवे. Which verse were we on last week? 26. So, last week we spoke on the fact we distinguished between transcendence and mundane consciousness. We distinguish the differences between transcendence and mundane consciousness, and the fact that one may act in transcendence and one may act in mundane consciousness. Externally, it is very difficult to perceive the difference, but internally it is consciousness. So the focus of the Bhagavad Gita and the focus of Srila Prabhupada's movement, the movement of Lord Chaitanya, is not about external activities. It is more about internal consciousness that drives external activities. So that's the reason why our society is called International Society for Krishna Consciousness. It is all about consciousness. So it is more a focus on what is inside than what is being performed outside. But for us to be able to act in a manner where we are aligned from within, we first have to train the exterior. The exterior has to be trained for us to be able to reinforce the interior. So these are the steps of Bhakti Yoga, where we have been given certain rules and regulations, we have been given certain kind of behavior, we have been given certain etiquette, we have been given certain activity which is to be performed in a certain way at a certain time, and all of this is to reinforce the interior. And what is the specific consciousness which we are trying to achieve within? What is it? Good. So our entire focus and all the activities associated is for us to somehow realize that we are servants of Krishna. So we keep that as a base, and external activities are being designed so that that particular fact is reinforced again, again, and again. Right. So we spoke of this the previous week. We spoke of the fact that you can create impressions of mundane consciousness, and we act upon such mundane consciousness because those impressions are already there. It modifies our behavior externally. Similarly, you can create impressions of devotional consciousness, and that consciousness will reinforce external behavior. Samskara. What kind of samskara does one person have? That samskara is seen outside. What kind of consciousness a person has? That manifests outside in every kind of activity. What level of consciousness a person has, it manifests outside in activity. Now, there was a beautiful example. In the early days, Mother Jadurani, she used to paint, and she was one of the first artists in the movement who came into the movement. I mean, she started out by hearing descriptions. She started out by hearing and getting, small Vedic prints from India, and then she started doing all those paintings for Prabhupada's books. All of these are done by Mother Jadurani. So initially, Srila Prabhupada asked her to paint a picture of Sri Narad Muni carrying the veena. So while she was painting the picture of Narad Muni carrying the veena, she at that time was inspired to visit the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. And she was visiting there, and at that time they were displaying Mona Lisa. Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa was being displayed in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And she was just describing that there were 3 or 4 blocks of people just waiting to spend less than a minute in front of that painting and for them to be able to just take a quick glimpse at it because it was Mona Lisa, it was so famous. So she had this impression that, somehow I am an artist and I should do something like this, so wonderful that people will line up and be able to see it, and this would be preaching. This impression was in her mind. And anyway, she started painting Narad Muni, and then she painted Narad Muni, and then the way she painted Narad Muni was a little bit muscular personality with, a thinner face, a Western conception of beauty. So she painted Narad Muni, and then she, put a veena, and then she sent it over to San Francisco. And devotees really said that this was really wonderful, it was beautiful, it was great, and so on and so forth. We were very enthused by this painting because we were distributing it, we were carrying it, and all that stuff. Then Prabhupada saw that, and his opinion and his view was completely different. He wrote back to her saying, the conception of beauty, he showed her a picture from Vrindavan. This was Brijvasi art. And Brijvasi art, there was this picture of Mother Yashoda. No, actually it was Surdas sitting in front of Krishna. He's blind, he's sitting in front of Krishna. And then you have this whole conception of Krishna with a small, red, lotus-like mouth, chubby cheeks and all that stuff. You have this completely different conception of beauty in Brijvasi art. So Srila Prabhupada showed her that the next time he sent her that. And he said, this conception of beauty is that of someone who is nourished by drinking milk. And he showed her the picture. This conception of beauty is of someone who has been eating meat. Can you imagine this? Completely different conception of beauty, and appreciation is also driven by external activity and what we perform, because that lays on samskaras. So we have our own conception of what we consider as being good, consider as being bad. There's so much going on in the subtle realm because of our external activity that we don't even perceive that this is actually creating impressions. We work in an environment, in an office. There's immense aggression in an office for you to accomplish things. It's sometimes, the office environment is hostile because you have hostility, you have intense competition, you have people constantly trying to undermine others, right? You're noticing that in the White House, right? Whatever President Obama wants to do, the Congress undermines him. It does not allow him to do. Whatever the Congress wants to do, he doesn't do. And there's this real competition going on between these two groups of people where there's nothing happening practically. There's practically nothing happening because somehow there's this conception that if you become successful, despite me, you become successful, I will have a problem. So there's constant competition which is going on at work. And what is that competition? This competition is somehow or the other, I should become successful and I should somehow bring this person down. It's both. It's just not one. It's always this objective that I should win and you should lose. And there's a lot of energy being put in the workplace in this kind of activity. It's actually encouraged, this kind of competition. Someone is aggressive, they get encouraged, and some people feel it's their birthright to be aggressive. Now, in these kind of situations, what do? When you exist in those environments, you bring the same consciousness into devotional circles as well. You find behavior in devotional circles where there's competition. Not healthy competition, unhealthy competition amongst Vaishnavas. There's unhealthy competition amongst Vaishnavas in serving Krishna. This unhealthy competition is enviousness. Somehow you should not exist and I should do this. Somehow I would be a better servant than you are in doing this service. So this conception is coming out from samskaras that are being imprinted at the workplace. These have been carried on. For 20 years you have been in these situations. You bring the same consciousness into the temple. And you start interacting with the Vaishnavas because you don't know better. Right? So these are impressions, and these are impressions that are created in the consciousness which modifies behavior. However, the devotional principle is quite the opposite. We create impressions. We create impressions of behavior, and those impressions of behavior ultimately result in actual consciousness, actual behavior. Because you start creating impressions first. And once you start creating impressions, those impressions actually become solidified, and you start processing information through that particular pyramid, that particular angle. So we offer obeisances to the Vaishnavas. We offer obeisances. Now the question is, while offering obeisances, we may not really feel like offering obeisances. We may really not feel that this person is worth my obeisances. Maybe they're not worth it. Who knows? So that might be a conception while we're paying obeisances. When we call someone Prabhu, we may not really mean it. We may just call them. It could just be lip service. We may call someone a Vaishnava. We might honor them. It could just be superficial, just on the surface. But it's good practice. It is good practice because these impressions of respect, even though insincere, as it goes on over a prolonged period of time, it would create impressions in the consciousness. And we will start processing things in a proper way at some point. That is the expectation. That's the reason why every lecture you hear about what? What do you hear about in every lecture? You'll hear about humility. Practically, anyone gives a class, they spend a couple of minutes on humility. Being humble, being humble, being humble. And one wonders, why repeat this? It's been heard ad nauseum. I've heard about it millions and millions of times. Why are you repeating it again and again? Why am I hearing about humility? Why am I hearing about it? The fact is that this is creating an impression. We will start processing information through that filter once it is available. Okay? Now imagine what goes on in our lives when we watch television. Who are the actors and the preceders of television? Who is in the television set? Are these people with very elevated consciousness? Obviously not. They are suffering. They are in fear. They are in agony. Right? Can you imagine the amount of media frenzy that was built over Hurricane Irene? They put so much fear in the hearts of people. I'm not complaining. It's not a bad thing to plan, but being fearful is not so wonderful. Planning is important. Fearful is not so wonderful. There's such a culture of fear about everything. Culture of fear about each and everything, because that's very good. People can take advantage of it. So when we watch television and we spend an intense amount of time in front of the television set, is it beneficial for Krishna consciousness? You are creating impressions in your heart of mundane consciousness. And these are very heavy impressions. And you start processing through those filters. Just as much as when we speak from the Bhagawad Gita, we speak from the Srimad Bhagavatam, we are creating impressions in the heart. When we read the Chaitanya Charitamrita, why do we read the Chaitanya Charitamrita? We are looking at the behavior of devotees. And those kind of behavior is creating an impression in our chitta. And ultimately, when we start acting, we remember those in some subliminal, subconscious manner, even if it is not done overtly. If you hear it enough times, it becomes a part of us. Because ultimately, we want to develop a culture of Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is about culture. And culture starts with thoughts. You have to process the right kind of thoughts for you to be able to have a culture. Culture is where I automatically act. I act because the environment is supporting that kind of action. I act because the environment is offering me that kind of support. It says that you're incentivized to act in a certain way. Become selfless. If you become selfless, there's encouragement. So in an environment where there's intense selflessness, such behavior is culture. In Vrindavan, intense selflessness is the way of life. So that's culture. Intense selflessness, with Krishna being in the center, is Vrindavan consciousness. And that is a way of life. Intense selflessness. Is there competition in Vrindavan? The answer is yes. But what is the purpose of such competition? The purpose of that competition is to give pleasure to Krishna. The competition which goes on in Vrindavan is a competition of selflessness. Intense selflessness. When you read about Gaur Leela, when you read about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Leela, you read about how devotees, for instance, Raghunath Das Goswami, Srinivas Acharya, they travel from one place to the other and then they meet this prominent devotee after prominent devotee. And when they met the prominent devotee, they fall down completely unconscious. And one wonders, how is this possible? What kind of pretense are they doing in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that they faint upon seeing each other? Because it's not even conceivable. It is not even conceivable to us. It is not even conceivable that such intense bond could exist between two human beings. It is not even conceivable that the presence of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda was so profound that the bond between two devotees who are connected to Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda was so intense that they could just faint by seeing each other. Why do people faint physically? Why? I'm asking you the same thing. Faint, losing consciousness. Why? Body does not know how to react. I'm sorry, what was that, Mataji? Yes. Basically, the body, when there is very traumatic news, when there's very negative news, people faint. They just faint on hearing some very bad news. We have heard of this several times, that someone just passed out the moment they heard something tragic. People faint because the body has a mechanism where it is not able to withstand the trauma. It basically shuts down so to protect itself. So why would devotees faint? Why would Lord Chaitanya faint? Why would devotees, when they meet each other, faint and pass out? Because the body could never comprehend the experience of the soul. The bond that existed between the devotees, which you read about in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, is a bond at the level of the soul. And the body does not have the capacity, the mind does not have the capacity to comprehend the experience of the soul. The intensity of bliss that comes out at that level, when they connect with each other, they connect at the level of the soul and they literally are outside of the body. The body just faints out of that experience because it's not able to comprehend anything. So when we hear about this, what is it which is happening to us? Are we hearing about these things with complete apathy? Are we hearing about and sitting in Chaitanya Charitamrita classes or Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam classes, complete apathy where we feel that, well, whatever. You know, people fainted, so what? I don't know how, but it doesn't even bother me. The fact is that if we are doing that, it's an issue. But then if we pay attention and we understand that such an experience did occur, it is actually telling us what is possible. It is telling us that something of such profundity is possible even in our own lives. It is possible. And then we create this impression in our heart of the behavior of devotees in Gaur Leela, of the behavior of devotees in the Srimad Bhagavatam. We choose role models, extremely critical. We choose role models who we start observing. We start observing. We start reading about them. We start really reading literature after literature, searching any kind of mention of a role model. So when we read the scripture and when we want to live like someone, understand what I'm trying to give you here. I'm trying to share some truth here where I'm trying to tell you that if you make a sincere attempt to connect to someone in Gaur Leela, you will be connected to such a person. The personality who exists eternally would start helping you. So pay attention. Pay attention to scriptures. The personalities in the scriptures are real, more real than we can ever comprehend. The personalities in the scripture are available to help us. They are ready to reach out, but it requires an intensity from us. Choose role models. Become inspired. Start becoming greedy to learn more and more about them. Then more and more will be revealed by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya. This is devotional service, where we pick role models. Haven't you seen teenagers? We were all teenagers. We all had our role models of rock stars, movie stars, whatever they have, the personality may be. And you could see, we all used to go hunting, go to the mall and then buy a big poster and then stick it on the wall, hero worship. This is samskara, right? And what happens once you stick it on the wall? You start looking like them. Because you go to the shop and you start buying clothes, people have a haircut just like their role model. They start talking like them, behaving like them. They develop certain kind of attributes. What is this all about? This is very impressionable. Now imagine finding someone in Gaur Leela whose attributes you really love, who you are very impressed by. When you scrutinizingly read the Shastra, you have the opportunity to find a personality who you're going to be inspired by. That is the whole purpose of Shastra. The purpose of Shastra is to create impressions for us to be able to follow in the footsteps of those who have done something before. The more seriously we take the reading, the more seriously we would be able to create impressions in our heart. My spiritual master, for instance, was very inspired by Sri Vasudev Datta. Right? Vasudev Datta was a very great personality in Gaur Leela. He was a servant of Lord Chaitanya. And his selflessness was astounding. His selflessness was astounding to such an extent that very sincerely he offered prayers to Sri Lord Chaitanya. He told him, and then remember this was not lip service. He sincerely told Lord Chaitanya from the bottom of his heart, because his consciousness, Vasudev Datta's consciousness, was so very high that when someone is at a very high level of consciousness, they perceive the suffering of others far more profoundly than those who are already suffering. You understand? Because normal life is great suffering for someone of higher consciousness. Right? Everything is fine, everything is going smoothly, we have no complaints. But the person feels, I'm happy. But someone of a very high consciousness looks at them and they're saying, oh, he's suffering. So he was of such high consciousness that he perceived the suffering of others, whoever he met. And his consciousness was such that he could not withstand the pain. He went and told Lord Chaitanya, he offered prayers to him, and his prayer was, Dear Lord, let me take on all the suffering of all the souls in the world. Let me go to hell. Please deliver them. And this was not meant ordinarily. This was a very sincere offering. Very sincere, of someone who knew the effect of material energy. Material energy, have you heard of this physical law, the law of conservation of matter? Yeah, that's real. The law of conservation of matter, it can take different forms, but it exists. Isn't that what the definition is? So fundamentally, it is true. In material energy, if you want to take the reactions of someone, it has to go somewhere. It cannot be annihilated. Someone has to take it up from one side to the other. That is a part of material energy. That's a part of what we have here. So he was ready to take on the intense suffering. He was ready to take on and become an instrument for whom he could grab all the reactions of everyone. And by doing so, others could be relieved. This was his prayer to Lord Chaitanya. This was his little prayer to Lord Chaitanya. Now the extent of selflessness is too intense. The extent of selflessness is too intense here. Right? It's intense. I will take on the suffering of others. Let them be delivered. Right? let them be delivered. It's too intense. So Lord Chaitanya promised him, saying, you don't have to suffer. Tears were coming out of Lord Chaitanya's eyes. You don't have to do that, but I will accept your promise. I will accept your proposition. I will deliver everyone. Lord Chaitanya made this promise. He said, I will deliver everyone. Let everyone be delivered by your mercy. Now, Vasudeva Datta, his actions and this particular fact that he was ready to take on the suffering of others. Not just the suffering of, if for example you have parents. Parents quite often make prayers to the Lord when the children are suffering, saying, let me suffer in their place. I would like to suffer in their place, because the love of the parent towards the child is such that the parent is ready to suffer in the place of the child. Let the disease come to me, dear Lord. Let me suffer. This is love. But will we say the same prayer for everyone in the world? People who we do not have even seen, we do not even know. But this was the prayer, and this is exactly the consciousness which Vasudeva Datta had. Can you imagine that consciousness? It is even difficult to comprehend the consciousness where we want to take on the suffering of others whom we do not even know. But that is Vaishnava consciousness. Now, this is a samskara. When you hear about Vasudeva Datta, when you read about Sri Vasudeva Datta from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, this becomes a samskara in our heart. The more we reflect on it, the more and more we reflect on it, the samskara, the impression that's being created, becomes more of a reality. In other words, we begin to accept the possibilities of such behavior. When we begin to accept the possibilities of such behavior, our own consciousness gets uplifted. Because now you have created a mental ladder, and you have climbed up the ladder, and you have told yourself that this is possible. It's fascinating, is it not? It's like the athlete who does maybe 50 laps. I'm just making a number here. 10 laps. And then slowly, steadily, he increases it to 15, 17, 18, right? And then he sees someone who is in the Olympics who is doing 50 in the same time period. Now that becomes an impression. He starts looking at it. He starts increasing. He starts setting up a plan. He starts proceeding towards it. And then that becomes a reality for the athlete, because now he has someone who has accomplished it, and then he himself has accepted it, possible, and then he is taking steps towards it. It becomes an impression. Right? So there's so much which can be done if you really take advantage of what's been made available. What's been made available is profound. Srila Prabhupada has given us everything. He has given us the books, he has given us the role models, going back several centuries, millions of years in his books. He has given us himself, his classes, his disciples, the disciples of his disciples, and so on and so forth. He has given us so much inspiration and so many impressions that we have to accept into our heart. And we just have to act upon it. We just have to accept it. We reflect upon it. Okay? Reflection is extremely important. It's not like you hear in one ear and goes away out of the other, and then we are done with it, finished. Then nothing happens. Nothing happens. But then when we keep hearing it, we act upon it, and then we start taking it up, contemplating. Contemplation would develop some attachment towards such concepts. And contemplation and attachment eventually would lead to action. And once we experience it by acting, we would want to act more on that platform, because that platform is a blissful platform. That platform is a blissful platform. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur defined humility as no expectations. That's the definition of humility. No expectations whatsoever from anyone. No expectations, practically. Humility. How can that be possible? That is possible because you accept what has been given to you by Krishna as a gift, and then you develop the courage to act upon such gifts. That's humility. Then Krishna gives you support, because we start accepting it. So this is the beauty of the system. It is all about creating the proper impressions in our heart. It's about allowing the Shastra to work on us. It is about allowing the Acharyas to work on us, making ourselves available fully, casting these doubts away, casting these aspersions away. Kick those obstacles away because you have so much positive input available. Why are we getting caught up with things that are not going to help? Why are we creating impediments on our path? Questions, right? So that's the whole process of Krishna consciousness. So now you have transcendental consciousness and you have mundane consciousness. Transcendental consciousness is created by acting transcendentally, which is created by thinking transcendentally, which is created by being in a transcendental environment and absorbing transcendental facts. It is created by having faith in transcendental facts. Because when we have faith, we experience. Because when we have faith, we act and we experience. When we do not have faith, we do not act. I remember several years ago, there was a workshop. And in that workshop, there were many devotees who were sitting and they were sharing their experiences on faith. And the moderator asked each one of them one question. And these were seasoned devotees who had spent around 20 years, 15 years in the movement. The moderator asked a question saying, did any of you ever have a break in... did any of you experience faithlessness in the instructions of the spiritual master? Did any of you experience faithlessness in the instructions of the spiritual master? And everyone unequivocally said, no, we never did. We were all extremely faithful. And then the moderator asked the next question. Did any of you have breaks in chanting the holy names after taking vows? And many of them said yes. So, what was this circumstance? This was a lack of faith in the instructions of the spiritual master. Right? Broken faith. When we take on something, but we do not take it on and we do not complete it, it's nothing but lack of faith. It's a lack of faith in the words of the spiritual master, in the words of the Guru. Most of our maladies, most of our problems come from the fact that we do not have faith. We simply do not have faith. That's where it comes from. If we had faith, we would be acting upon that faith. By acting upon that faith, we will be experiencing. By experiencing, we will be reinforcing the faith. Most of our problems start with having little faith. Laziness is also not having faith. Because we become lazy because we are allowing the body and the mind to tell us that sleeping or not acting on the words of the spiritual master is more important than his words. So that's a lack of faith. Suppose I had full faith, 100% faith, that Krishna was real. I had full faith that Lord Chaitanya's movement is real. I had full faith that the holy names are non-different from Krishna. Right? How would my body and mind allow me to become lazy? What is laziness? What is lethargy? Laziness and lethargy is our body taking over and telling us that, the instructions of your spiritual master is less important. Sleep is more important. Right? So this is actually lack of faith. If faith was very strong, which means that faith is so strong that I would not allow anything to interfere, then that is how things proceed. Right? So this is nothing but lack of faith. It is the same thing. Okay? Because Prabhupada said this. If we really had faith, how would the mind dare tell us that something is better? How dare the mind even dictate to us that some other activity is more profound than what this is? It's a lack of faith. What is it which is preventing us from taking up Krishna consciousness fully? Lack of faith in the instructions being received. We somehow feel that it's not time for us, or maybe I will become serious when I grow old, when maybe next year, few years from now. It's a lack of faith in the instructions. I remember, I just find it astonishing, very astonishing, to see so many wonderful disciples of Srila Prabhupada. Imagine you are 20, you are 21, you are 22, and you've grown up in a culture which is completely non-Vedic. You have nothing to do with the Vedic culture. You're growing up in a country like America. You have been told so many things. You have been not told so many things. You grow up there, and then you have someone come from India. Of course, that someone was a very special someone. It was Srila Prabhupada. And the moment he comes into your life, you're 19, you're 20, 21, 25, you just turn around, you give up everything, and you join his movement, and you are spreading the movement of Lord Chaitanya. Many of them were very well educated. Many of them had very good jobs. I can give you even Bhakti Charu Maharaj. He had been to Germany, and he got himself educated with a master's degree in Germany. He was very highly qualified, and then he comes back, and he is in search of the truth. He meets Srila Prabhupada. He becomes his servant. Can you imagine this? And then Prabhupada one day tells him that, Maharaj was sharing this, that you have enjoyed for so many lifetimes. Why do you want to pursue the same course again? Don't get involved with wife and family. Prabhupada said, give this lifetime to Krishna, to Lord Chaitanya. Maharaj takes up sannyas after that. So now, what are we looking at here? And then you have the case of Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj was a Princeton graduate. He was a graduate from Princeton. He was, employed by the government of New Jersey. He had a nice house. He had a car. He had everything. 1 month after meeting Prabhupada, he sells everything, donates the money, and goes and joins the movement full time. He is how old? 22? 23? Can you imagine this? It's hard to conceive the quality of these people. It's really wonderful. They're very high quality souls who Srila Prabhupada attracted, and their quality of faith in him was also very profound. Right? And then he brings Lord Jagannath. Jagannath is extremely good looking, he is beautiful, but for the first time when you show a Westerner that this is God, right? That becomes difficult for them, saying this is God. He's extremely good looking, but this is God. Because they bought Jagannath once. They went into San Francisco. I think they bought Balaram first. They bought Balaram because Prabhupada was describing Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra, and then they just bought a deity thinking they didn't know what it was. They thought it was cute. They wanted to give it to Prabhupada. Prabhupada said there should have been 2 other dolls along with this. Where are they? And immediately they ran back to the same place because he just chased them out, and they got, Jagannath and Subhadra Mai. Can you imagine this whole conception? That you are coming in touch with God. What is the quality that you should have? That you have so much faith. This is God. Accept it. Yes. Amazing. Amazing faith. Very high quality people because they just got attracted. They came in and they served so wonderfully. They dedicated themselves. Young people. They had so much. Very young. 20, 25. They gave up everything. Gave up their families, so on and so forth. And then got into those temples. Morning to night they would go book distribution. They would strategize for Srila Prabhupada. They would take chances. They would take risks for Srila Prabhupada. They would do things which they probably wouldn't have done in their lives, even for themselves. Because Prabhupada's love was so much that they wanted to experience that love. But this is faith. Faith requires action. Faith is not sentimental. Faith requires action. If we have faith, show it. If you do not have faith, beg for it. It's a problem. And we cannot exist in spiritual life cruising along. That's a problem. You cannot cruise along in spiritual life for year after year after year. You cannot do that. Spiritual life is either you're progressing or you're regressing. It's one or the other. You either this way or that way. You cannot do this. Same level, I'll go on year after year. Because at some point, this will happen. You would start going down. So we'll have to start accounting for ourselves. We'll have to become accountable. We'll have to take into account that this wonderful opportunity has been made available. We take advantage of it because this opportunity is required for us to move forward. These impressions are critical. This opportunity to be able to read, to be able to digest, to be able to hear, and to act upon is critical. One cannot forego such things. Right? You cannot forego such experiences. It is critical. So it requires that we take it up and we act upon it. We don't compromise. Okay? So now, verse 26, Na buddhi bedam janayed Ajnanam karma sanginam Josayet sarpa karmani Vidwan yukta samacharan, so as not to disrupt the minds of ignorant men attached to the fruitive results of prescribed duties. Disrupt the minds of ignorant men attached to the fruitive results of prescribed duties. A learned person should not induce them to stop work. Rather, by working in the spirit of devotion, he should engage them in all sorts of activities for the gradual development of Krishna consciousness. So fruitive activity, again, is a matter of consciousness. Do you realize? There are different levels of consciousness which make us attractive or attract ourselves to certain kind of activity. I described it in the beginning. The different levels of consciousness where your external output is also based on what is inside. Our conception of beauty is based on what is inside, what we get attracted to. So many things, and so is the case with who we worship and how we are connecting to Krishna. If we connect to Krishna through fruitive activity, in other words, where I perform a puja and I need some results for it. I keep a certain vrata and I will experience some positive results for it. This is fruitive activity. Right? People worship the demigods for results. Right? People worship the demigods for results. They worship the demigods for wealth. They worship the demigods for fame, to resolve certain issues, marriage, so on and so forth. They worship different demigods. This is fruitive activity. They have a certain fruit in mind and they are worshipping the demigods. And this process goes on. We do not want to disturb that process because they are connecting to Krishna in one indirect fashion through his separated energies. Instead, what we want to do is do what? What is the understanding that we just shared now for the last half hour, 45 minutes? We want to shift their consciousness. Because you shift the consciousness within, automatically the external activity changes. Someone could be engaging in fruitive activity by worshipping the demigods. If you make them selfless and tell them, continue worshipping, do not ask for anything from that personality. That shift in consciousness would automatically allow them to graduate and move on to the next level and to serve the Lord. Do you understand this technique? So as preachers, we do not really go and then tell someone, don't worship this demigod. No. Let them continue worshipping, but then you start educating them. Initially you tell them, become selfless. When you are worshipping the demigod and you're asking for a result, they are not directly involved. It's incredulous where people think that the demigod can be directly involved. You're worshipping Ganesha. Yesterday was Vinayak Chaturthi, correct? So when you're worshipping Lord Ganesha, and people worship Lord Ganesha for money, for so many other things, and when you worship him for so many other things, what makes us think that he is going to get directly involved with us? He has his own administrative system, right? You are putting a petition saying you want money, and you're putting it to Lord Ganesha. He has got a clerk at some lower level who takes that petition from you. He looks to see, have you broken enough coconuts? Have you gone around enough times in the temple? Have you kept the vrata? And if you have done all of this, he does a check mark on that particular application and he grants you that result. Finished. We can claim that we are devoted to Ganesha. Yeah, you are devoted to Ganesha, but you're dealing with this clerk because you really don't want Ganesha. You want what he can give you. So now there is a shift in consciousness. You go and educate that person saying, don't do this because you really want to get connected to him. Stop asking for things. Just worship him for benedictions, for mercy. Worship him because you're attracted to him. Once they start doing that, automatically Ganesha starts looking at them directly. The clerk has to move away because now they don't want anything from the system. They want to deal with him directly. Do you understand? Now he has to look down and say, oh, you are worshipping me. What could I give you? He starts looking at you and then he says, the best thing I could give you is what I have, which is Krishna consciousness. Ganesha has Krishna consciousness and he will say, this is wonderful. Since you are so dear to me and you don't want all the other nonsense, here's Krishna consciousness. He is capable. He can give you blessings. He can remove all the vigna, the obstacles towards meeting a servant of Srila Prabhupada and getting a Bhagawad Gita, getting some obstacle removed so that we could move forward. Can you imagine this system? So what we need to do is that we need to be able to focus on people and see that yes, if they are very devoted to a personality, that's wonderful because they are devoted to someone. That personality could be a separated energy of Krishna. But they are devoted to someone who is connected to Krishna. So now our trick is to shift the consciousness. Once we shift the consciousness, then they get blessed and they move on. We don't displace them, we don't discourage them, stop this, stop that, and we don't act as if what we have, make them feel so inferior and so on. No, that's not what's going to happen. That's not going to encourage them. We encourage them by allowing them to become better servants. Shift their consciousness. Automatically they will move on. Right? Because the demigods, they are living entities. They are far superior living entities. They are like us. They are living entities. They are servants of Krishna. So when they feel that someone does not want anything from them, they bless them by removing the obstacles so that they make progress. There's a shift in consciousness, they make progress. Okay? So that is very important for us to be able to remember because we come in touch with so many people. We should be very careful even within our families. Encourage them to become selfless. Encourage them to stop asking for things. Make little shifts in consciousness. You will see bigger, faster results than trying to move on, hit them headlong, and then make a scene. So right now we do not do that. So what we do is we slowly shift their consciousness. And then while we shift their consciousness and they become selfless, they automatically become attracted to Krishna consciousness because that is their original nature. Then you start bringing them, giving them prasadam and then bringing them closer. So there's a certain strategy involved, which is what Krishna is talking about here, saying if you're wise, you will not stop others from doing what they are doing. You will pay attention and you will see how best to serve them. So at whatever level they are, how to improve. And once you allow them to improve, automatically they move up. That's our job. We shift consciousness. That's what we do. So gradually, their propensities exist. Those propensities, you start engaging them in the service of Krishna. Gradually. We start bringing Krishna into the center. And they accept it. They accept it because you respected them. You allowed them. And you saw that they had faith. You respected their faith. And slowly, steadily, now they are ready to listen. And they are bringing in Krishna into their lives. As they are supposed to. So verse 27, which is more or less the same thing. Prakriतेः क्रियमाणानि गुणैः कर्माणि सर्वशः अहंकार विमूढात्मा kartaham iti manyate. The spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the three modes of material nature. The spirit soul is bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities. So the spirit soul is thinking that he is doing the activities. In reality, it is consciousness. It is the three modes of nature. If someone is tamasic, they act in a certain way. If they are rajasic, they act in a certain way. If they are sattvic, they act in a certain way. The consciousness from within is going to drive external activity. See, the whole concept is about consciousness. You shift consciousness, external results will be forthcoming. You act externally to reinforce internal consciousness. Both ways. Now here we are talking about the fact that it is the three modes which are making us act. The spirit soul is not the doer, it is the modes that are making us act. It is the modes that are making us act. We'll speak about this topic in a subsequent week because it is far more elaborate. We already touched upon it. We spoke of the fact that consciousness gives you a certain conception of beauty, right, earlier on in the class. What is that consciousness? It is one of the three modes. How do I see something as being beautiful? Then you draw it, you develop a picture, you build a sculpture based on what you think is beautiful. And what do you think is beautiful is going to be based on what you eat. Srila Prabhupada said a meat eater has a certain kind of conception of beauty. A milk drinker has a conception of beauty. And these two conceptions are completely different. Brijbasi painting has a certain conception, right? Someone else draws, it has its own conception. So anyway, Srila Prabhupada did not discourage Mother Jadurani. He encouraged her and he called her and then spoke to her after making the statement. But the fact is, he wanted to drive home a simple message. The external activity that we do is based on the internal modes of nature. So it's a very simple truth. You increase and elevate the modes of nature, the external activity, taste, perception, what we attract into our lives, everything changes. What kind of people would you like to spend time with? Changes completely. Based on internal consciousness. Who do you want to hang out with? It depends on internal consciousness. Because they sync up, they speak my kind of language, they do my kind of things. But what you do and what you speak is based on your consciousness. You elevate it and automatically everything else changes externally. See, it's such a simple but profound concept. How many of you in the past 2 years have seen your eating preferences change quite dramatically? Preferences, not force. Right? What you like, what you prefer is changing dramatically. You're not being forced, but it's your preference. Why is this happening? Because there's a shift in internal consciousness. As consciousness goes higher, automatically taste changes, perception changes. What kind of music would you like to hear? What kind of entertainment would you prefer? In the Roman civilization, the civilizations that have been destroyed, any civilization that has been destroyed, if you look at the way they were entertaining themselves, you can make out that that civilization is going to end. In the Roman civilization, entertainment was throwing people to the lions and watching them being torn apart. It was seeing the gladiators hurt themselves, malign themselves, kill themselves, cut themselves, maim themselves, and then that used to be enjoyment for the population. When that is the level and the crass enjoyment which people have, you know that what mode is this? Tamas, this is the mode of ignorance. So whenever you have an entire population in the mode of ignorance, what are they good at? What are they good at? Mode of ignorance people. What are they good at? Destroying, my friends. destroying. Mode of goodness, preservation. Mode of passion, creation. Mode of darkness, ignorance, destruction. So when you have destructive entertainment propensities across the board in the entire population, understand very clearly that civilization is going to end. Because the entire population will make choices. How do you make choices in life? Based on what? On what is going on here. Based on consciousness, you make choices. And based on choices, how will your life turn out? So constant wrong choices which are destructive, ultimately civilization ends. Life ends, civilization ends, people become destructive. Do we realize how simple, profound this concept is in terms of leading us to act? Action is dependent on consciousness. And these are nothing but the modes. Our job is to elevate consciousness. Waking up at 4 a.m., mode of goodness. Chanting. Being clean at all times. Clean habits. Understanding that something is dirty, something is not dirty. Having that perception. Right? Spending time in activities which are of a higher level. All of these activities fundamentally would make our consciousness elevate ourselves. External activities will elevate. Similarly, external activities can bring down. Internal consciousness, on the other hand, can also make us act in one way. So it is like the chicken and egg principle, that you develop a certain kind of consciousness, you're going to act in a certain way. And you act in a certain way, you can develop a certain kind of consciousness. Because these are impressions. Okay? So that is this verse. Let me see if there's one more verse which is almost the same. I think we'll leave it here because we can continue this topic of the modes. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Any questions? Yes, Mataji. In other words, can they be in goodness, ignorance, and passion? In most cases, it's always mixed consciousness. Okay? But at any given time, you will have one kind of consciousness dominating. Sometimes ignorance dominates, but is mixed with goodness and passion. Sometimes passion dominates, mixed with ignorance and goodness. Sometimes goodness dominates, mixed with passion and ignorance. So it's a domination. Right? Yes. The pujari who was giving, who was offering, who was serving inside, he was asking for money. See, this is, yeah, well, fundamentally, that is the environment. That is the environment that has been created because a person who becomes indifferent to his proximity and does not have an understanding of what he does there, right? And such a person develops apathy. In that situation, for him, it's just another job. Externally, he is right there trying to do some service, but since internally he has become contaminated, right? It is not helping him. So it is manifesting itself as mode of passion, more like a Shudra kind of situation, where I'm giving you, give me money, or something like that. See, everyone needs to be maintained. The Brahmanical standard of maintenance for a Brahmana is where a Brahmana begs and then society gives and he sustains himself. Or very high standard Brahmanas, they would beg, they would only eat if they receive alms. If not, they would not eat. Right? But over a period of time, consciousness shifts and people engage in this kind of activities. Even though they are engaged in Brahmanical activities, now you have this mixed consciousness in the heart, which contaminates them, even though they are there and around the temple and so on and so forth. Whereas, the action, external action it's more like a business. So not so wonderful. It is not so wonderful because it is not helping you, because now you're raising this question after going to a temple and asking me, what do you think about that? Because for you, when you went around in the temple, this particular act by the pujari has left an impression in your heart that you remember it now. How many years back did you go there and when this incident happened? Yeah. So now for 4 years after you visit this temple, you are remembering this pujari who took money from you for giving you the prasad. Right? This is an impression. So he is doing a disservice to you, to those who are supposed to be served, by acting in the way he is acting, because he is a servant of Lord Venkateshwara. Balaji would not want him to act in this manner, right? He is supposed to be serving, keeping in mind what Balaji wants him to do. Instead, he has forgotten Balaji and he is acting on his own motivations. So, which is not so wonderful. See, that is the reason why there's a very big difference. Now, we are not being biased. The Tirupati temple, for instance, the deity there is our family deity as well, in my family. The sense that, we have every anything major, festival, so on and so forth, when the babies are born, marriage takes place, we have to visit and so on and so forth, like Kuladevata, as we call it. But after I came in touch with Srila Prabhupada's movement and I experienced consciousness within the temples that Srila Prabhupada built for us and within the devotees and the philosophy, I lost my motivation of going there. My mother constantly argues with me, but I lost the motivation and I say very clearly that I'm serving Balaji here. He is non-different. He is right there in Srila Prabhupada's temples. I don't feel motivated in going there because I'm not surrounded by people and an atmosphere of wanting to serve Krishna. I'm surrounded by people who are coming there saying, I need to do business with you. Give me this, give me that, give me this, give me that. This rajas which is out there in the crowd, somehow or the other I have a problem. I want to go around your temple 10 times. I want to get this out of you. So you have hundreds and thousands of people around you and all of them in their mind, they're only thinking, how can I grab this? How can I do this? And we are not complaining. It's a wonderful thing that at least they're going to Balaji to do this. It's wonderful. But that is not the atmosphere or the environment which can enthuse us and propel us forward. It will bring about questions such as this. Right. So honestly, I'm not motivated. I went to Guruvayur. I was not too motivated either. I went to Guruvayur, I think 4 years back, 5 years back. I can very clearly distinguish it. Srirangam is very distinct. There is the atmosphere of ISKCON. There is this atmosphere of selflessness in Srirangam. Because many of these places have become extremely commercialized where unfortunately there's deterioration. But Srila Prabhupada has already provided us. That's the beauty. Srila Prabhupada has created homes where we can go and spend time. We can experience selflessness, understand what is selflessness. Right? 2 days from now, we are going to have a Janmashtami festival. It is not Janmashtami. It is even more auspicious than Janmashtami. It is Radhashtami. But it is not Janmashtami, but we are holding a big festival, inviting thousands and thousands of people, right? We know it's not Janmashtami, but it is important for us to have such a festival so that others can be served. And when they walk into the temple, when they walk into the surroundings, they have to experience the selflessness that we have in our hearts. And when they experience the selflessness, you are creating impressions which they carry. And with that impression, they would come back and they would be able to cultivate the Krishna consciousness. So this is an opportunity for service. This is an opportunity for us to become selfless. Right. So now our movement has been designed to elevate people and take them back to Godhead. While your typical temple, which is out there, has not been designed with that outlook. Even though primarily it was done originally for that. That's not the mood of people who are within. They are not staffed by people like that. So they leave different impressions in your heart. Well, it is not the question of doing agriculture. It is a question of what utility a person can offer to society. Someone who has great ability to be able to immerse themselves in Shastra, be able to absorb themselves in Shastra, and who has the ability to constantly remain in the mode of goodness, and who can advise others, is quite rare. And such a person should be supported by society when he comes out for begging alms. Okay? Now, there are many who can farm and who can survive. Nothing wrong about farming and surviving. Nothing wrong about doing that. But someone who is Brahmanical, who is oriented, who has the capacity to digest scriptures, who has the capacity to address the issues which concern people, such a person should be supported by society. Our problem is this: when such personalities were not very clearly supported, and they started going out wanting to support themselves, right? Then there was really no one who could offer a connection to the scriptures. The entire collapse of the Vedic system happened because of the impotency of the Brahmanical class. The entire Vedic system collapsed because the head started collapsing, which is like someone has brain damage, you're literally done. Society started collapsing because of that. Society started collapsing because of that. Okay? So is there something wrong? Nothing wrong. But the way we look at it, right? For example, if someone is extremely talented in doing a certain activity, right? Any modern corporation has, different, clerks and so on and so forth and secretaries supporting such a person so that they don't waste their time in other mundane activities and they can focus on more productive stuff. It is the same concept. That's why there are no Brahmanas today, right? Everybody is a Shudra. Kalo Shudra Sambhavaha. Everybody is a Shudra. There are no Brahmanas. Brahmana is not defined by birth. Brahmana is defined by motivation, is defined by quality from within. One could claim that I'm a Brahmana by birth, but then if they're acting on a Shudra level and they're living on Shudra level of consciousness, then why are they a Brahmana? This is not the definition of Bhagavad Gita. So these days, everybody is Shudra, right? But we can elevate ourselves to the Brahmanical level and go beyond as well. That's the opportunity. Can we say what? I'm sorry. I'm still not getting it. Well, practically, we would see Krishna consciousness is not so much about abstaining from activity. Krishna consciousness is about keeping Krishna in the center and understanding what is primary and what is secondary. The secondary is important because it supports the primary, but you have to make a distinction. Going to a job, making money is important because so you don't have to worry about it. It's as simple as that. So there's a practical consideration. Going to a job, making money so that you support yourself, and then by supporting yourself, you don't have to worry about money and you can focus on service, you can focus on sadhana. That's our motivation. So we do act, but we keep Krishna in the center. Right? We don't compromise on the secondary, but we understand what is primary. Right? So that's important. Yes, Mataji. Okay, two of them. You can go first. Yes. It was arranged. It was arranged. Yeah, the question is, the Western disciples who were so motivated by Srila Prabhupada, were they arranged by Lord Chaitanya to be born in certain locations with certain kind of bodies to support the movement of Lord Chaitanya, so that when Srila Prabhupada came and he sat down in Tompkins Park and he started Harinam, hearing the holy names, all these souls woke up. Jiva Jago. They just woke up. Yes, it's a fact. These were personalities who had made a lot of advancement and they came there. But many of them were also personalities who received the mercy of Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada ji was giving a class one day, Srila Prabhupada, and he was giving a class and he was talking about the fact that one has to be religious and only then would he be able to develop transcendental qualities. At least basic dharma has to be there and then one can develop transcendental qualities. So one disciple asked him, saying, Srila Prabhupada, we come from a background where we don't have any dharma. So how did we develop any qualities? How can we develop? He said, I gave you all those qualities. So now you develop. So in some cases, most cases, he also blessed them. But there were many special personalities who had already been connected one way or the other. They came back to serve Srila Prabhupada. That's the arrangement of Lord Chaitanya. His mission is like an army. And Prabhupada led a worldwide army. Imagine this. Single-handedly, he managed a worldwide mission. And they were all very young, 20, 25-year-olds. Imagine the amount of training. Incredible. What's your question? Why is what? Well, Lord Chaitanya spent a lot of time in South India. So the South Indian Yatra is being done. See, the South India, I don't get motivated in going to places where there's a certain kind. There is no Prabhupada consciousness. It does not attract me. If I go to Tirupati, I would rather go to the Tirupati ISKCON temple and spend time there, meet the devotees to see what is happening there. I would be more interested in doing that than going up and then having darshan in a place where I hardly have half a second, I'm being pushed around, I'm constantly thinking of something else and then I'm out, finished. Right? So the question is, why are we spending time in South India? Why are we going for South India Yatra? South India has great examples of selflessness. Lord Chaitanya spent a lot of time visiting temples in South India. So when we visit those temples, be it Balaji temple, be it Srirangam, be it the Ananta Padmanabha temple in Trivandrum, be it all those places, whenever we visit all those places, we relive the experiences that took place during Gaur Leela. So it's a very important event for us. Plus, in Sri Vaishnavism, in the Ramanuja Parampara, there were some very exemplary, great personalities, great Vaishnava personalities in every Madhvacharya's line, Ramanujacharya's line. And all these wonderful personalities, when we learn about them, when we look at the circumstances around them, it also allows us to look at other Vaishnavas, even though they wear a different kind of tilak. We learn to look at that and we start understanding how the conception of Vaishnavism has also moved on. That is one. Second is we also look at them and we learn from them. Right? Gopala Bhatta Goswami, most of our scriptures, our entire Pancharatra, entire system of deity worship, our process of initiation, it is all from the Ramanuja Parampara. Practically, everything has come from the Ramanuja Parampara. Even the Achintya Beda Beda Tattva, which is the principle of oneness, right, and simultaneous difference, is Vishishta Advaita in one sense, very closely resembles Vishishta Advaita, which is the philosophical Vedantic conception of Ramanujacharya. So there's great alignment with different Vaishnava Sampradayas. So when I meant that, I'm not saying that there are not examples of wonderful places where you can get inspired. I was just saying that when I go there, sometimes I get discouraged because we go there for hardly 2 weeks, 3 weeks in India from America, and we spend a couple of days in a place which does not inspire us. It becomes a problem. For me, inspiration is Mayapur. For me, that's where I go. I would encourage everyone. For me, Gaur Leela is all that is. For me, it is Mayapur. So that I would go there. I would spend time. I would go into Prabhupada's temples. I'm just sharing my own experience because I had the opportunity to grow up in Ramanuja family, Sri Vaishnava family, where I was able to observe the practices, I was able to observe the motivation and the temples and so on and so forth, right? And then later on I came in touch with our movement. So I had a good experience of being able to compare both and to understand, the distinction of what is better, in a sense, what made me fully inspired. Can I appreciate the sacrifices of the acharyas in the Sri Vaishnava Parampara now? I can appreciate them much better because of Prabhupada's mercy. Right. So when Radhanath Maharaj and other Maharajas, they take the disciples to South India tours, and then you go and look at the different alvars, the different saints of the Sri Vaishnava tradition, and how they served Krishna. It's incredible. It is almost like reading the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It is, well, those are details. Those are details. It is almost like saying that I'm serving in Goloka, right? And then anyone from Vaikuntha, in one of those Vaikuntha planets, comes up, and we tell them, you have a problem. Okay? You have a problem with yourself. Because I'm serving in Goloka, I have understood Goloka, I have understood very intimate pastimes of the Lord, I am superior. And you, since you're serving in Vaikuntha, and you have this conception of awe and reverence, are inferior. This is not Vaishnava consciousness. Right? Krishna deals with different personalities in different ways, different motivations. Our idea should be that we go and appreciate all of that and become inspired to become better servants. Why would Lord Chaitanya move around? He went around, he spent a lot of time in Sri Rangam, he distributed the holy names. He was inspired. The deities of Lord Chaitanya are still in Sri Rangam. Right. So, our acharyas have done that. Yes. So, anything affects the consciousness. The more we spend time in contemplation before acting, more will be the effect of that action on our consciousness. Right? The more we are forced to act where we do not even pay attention to what we are doing, less would be the effect, but it will still have an effect. Right? That's the reason why we say that when you're reading and chanting prayers of the Acharyas, the Vaishnava songbook, understand what you're chanting. If you do not understand what you're chanting, it will still have an effect, but it will not be as wonderful as if you understand. So, that's the difference. Right? Is there anything else, or should we stop? Okay, I think I want to stop here. Srila Prabhupada ki